The first time Princess Aurelia Vale saw a human kneel, she laughed, because she believed the creature had remembered its place. And the second time she saw a human kneel, the sky above her palace was burning. Her fleet was ash, her crown was cracked, and that same human knelt before a broken blast door with both arms spread wide, holding back the end of her species with blood, steel, and a promise he had no reason to keep. She had hated humans since childhood, hated their soft voices in council chambers, hated their stubborn eyes, hated the way they walked into rooms owned by older empires and behaved as if age did not equal worth. Her tutors taught her that mankind was a young border species from wet little Earth, clever with machines, reckless with mercy. Too sentimental to survive the older laws of the stars, her father called humans useful dogs. Loud when chained, dangerous only when cornered, and Aurelia believed him, because believing him made the universe simple. The strong ruled, the weak obeyed, and humans were weak because they kept saving things that had no value. She met Captain Rowan Hale 3 months before Extinction came. Standing above him in the Hall of Nine Suns while the Galactic Compact debated aid for a plague zone, Aurelia remembered his face because he did not lower his eyes when she entered. He was tall, plain by Aurelian standards, brown hair touched with gray, one old scar beneath his right eye, and hands that looked made for carrying wounded soldiers instead of signing treaties. He asked for passage through Aurelian space so human medical convoys could reach the Kethri nests before their hatchlings suffocated. Aurelia refused before her father could answer. Humanity mistakes pity for policy, she said. The Aurelian lanes are not charity roads. Hay looked at the red markers over the plague moons, then back at her, Princess. 3 million children will die within 6 days. Aurelia smiled coldly. Then, perhaps their queens should have chosen stronger allies. Hale did not shout. He only placed one hand over his heart and bowed once, not to her power, but to the dead already forming in his imagination. That bow made her angrier than defiance, because it felt like judgment. And then the human did the unforgivable thing. He saved them anyway. By the time Aurelia learned that Hale had taken his convoy through a collapsing comet field outside Aurelian jurisdiction, lost to escorts, and delivered the cure with 17 minutes remaining, the compact was singing his name in a dozen languages. Her father called it theatrical self-murder disguised as heroism. Her generals called it impossible. Aurelia called it typical human vanity, because hatred is easiest when truth never stands still long enough to be seen. She banned human vessels from ceremonial ports for a season, and when Hale sent a polite apology for any diplomatic discomfort caused by saving 3 million lives, she crushed the message crystal beneath her heel from that day. She used his name as a private curse, Rowan Hale. The ape captain, whose quiet decency followed her through victory feasts like smoke under a locked door. Aurelia's hatred became useful. And useful hatred is the most dangerous kind. She mocked human memorials, blocked humanitarian corridors when they crossed imperial prestige routes, and approved weapons tests near disputed human mining rings because she wanted mankind to understand boundaries. Yet humans kept appearing wherever disaster struck, dragging miners from cracked asteroids, sealing reactors on poisoned stations, escorting alien funeral barges through pirate space. They arrived with welders and water, with blankets and bad jokes, with soldiers who fought like ancient monsters and doctors who wept over strangers. Aurelia told herself it was strategy. Hearts were doors. Humans merely liked entering through them, but deep beneath certainty, there was irritation. Because no empire she respected had ever earned loyalty by kneeling beside the dying. And humanity kept doing exactly that. The extinction warning arrived during the Festival of Ascendant Blood, when 10,000 nobles filled the orbital gardens above Valoria Prime and the imperial family received its tribute beneath glass and stars. Aurelia was accepting a blade from the conquered Prince of Thas when every jewel in the hall went dark. Then the sky beyond the dome turned white with the synchronized death flare of 12 outer watch stations. A single message tore through every secure channel. The devouring choir has awakened. The eastern horizon of space folded open and revealed a wall of black vessels moving without engine light. Countless curved shapes like broken ribs carved from night, they did not hail, they simply advanced. And every sensor that touched them screamed until its operators bled from the ears. The choir was an ancient, self-replicating war ecology, consuming metals, atmospheres, oceans, nervous systems, and memory. It did not conquer worlds. It erased the evidence that worlds had ever existed for the first time in her life. Princess Aurelia watched an enemy approach that did not care who her father was. The Empire answered with arrogance because arrogance had always answered first. 10 Aurelian battle groups moved from ceremonial orbit in golden arcs. Plasma lances charged, captains reciting lineage oaths across open channels. Aurelia stood beside Emperor Celian as the first volleys struck the black wall. And for one breath, the universe seemed obedient again. Suns of fire blossomed across the void. Officers cheered, nobles dropped to their knees. Then the fire bent inward. Every explosion collapsed, as if swallowed by invisible mouths. The choir absorbed the energy, reshaped it, and returned it as needles of cold violet light that passed through shields. Hull, bone, and prayer with equal ease. The battle group Radiant Spear vanished in 12 seconds. The Dawn Crown lasted 8. The sacred Dreadnought Imperium broke open from within. Aurelia heard her father whisper impossible. And that frightened her more than the enemy. By dusk, there was no dusk, because smoke from falling orbital stations had turned the capital sky into a bruise. Evacuation alarms screamed through the towers, but evacuation had been designed for rebellions. Not apocalypse, noble houses seized private skydocks. Military transports prioritized bloodline archives over hospital districts. Priests filled temple vaults, while common citizens hammered at sealed gates below. Aurelia moved through the citadel in armor beneath her torn festival cloak, giving orders until her voice cracked. Then reports arrived from the colonies: Heshvale gone, Marrow Ring silent, Pearl Farms consumed, the Academy moon cut in half. Every ally who had bowed before Celian's throne discovered urgent reasons to be elsewhere. By the second night, Valoria Prime stood nearly alone. In the Empire that called mercy weakness, learned what it meant to be strategically inconvenient. That was when the human signal arrived. It came through a battered relay the choir had missed, low power, compressed. Carried on old emergency bands no Imperial officer respected enough to jam. A human voice filled the war room. "This is Captain Rowan Hale of the Terran Relief Carrier, Mercy of Dawn. We are inbound with civilian evacuation capacity, combat engineers, medical detachments, and escort elements mark corridors for landing." Emperor Celian rose from his life support throne. "No humans?" he rasped. "No Earth-carrying birds in my sky?" Aurelia felt the same reflexive disgust. Humans would see the Empire bleeding. Humans would carry stories of Aurelian terror back to their muddy world. She stepped toward the console to reject the transmission. Then a report flashed across the display. Southern shield grid failing. 8 million civilians trapped. Oxygen processors damaged. Choir harvesters entering low atmosphere. Hale's voice returned. "Princess Aurelia, open the corridors, or your people die while we argue." The room waited for her hatred to speak, and for the first time her hatred had nothing useful to say. She opened the corridors. Asterisk human ships entered Valorian space like a line of lanterns moving into a storm. Not majestic, not uniform, not beautiful. Old freighters armored with welded plating. Hospital barges with spinning gravity rings. Rescue cutters, fuel tankers, tugs, militia frigates. Mining haulers converted into evacuation racks. And behind them, 6 Terran warships painted dull gray. Scarred from older battles, nobody in the Aurelian court had cared to remember. At their center came Mercy of Dawn, vast and blunt-nosed, once a colony arc. Now carrying enough drop craft to empty cities if the skies stayed open. The human fleet did not pause to admire Imperial ruins. It broke into task groups with brutal efficiency. Engineers descended into burning shield towers. Marines secured panic-crushed spaceports. Doctors established triage tents in palace plazas where nobles had once forbidden commoners to stand. Human pilots flew through debris so dense Aurelian navigation spirits refused to calculate it. They landed under fire, loaded strangers, lifted, returned, landed again. Aurelia watched from the citadel balcony as one human cutter took a choir spike through its left engine and still finished, docking with the children's hospital before crashing into the river beyond it. The pilot's last transmission was not a curse, not a prayer, but a checklist confirming that all patients had been transferred. Aurelia hated him for that too, because gratitude was beginning to hurt. Captain Hale entered the citadel at the 4th hour before planetary shield collapse. Escorted by 2 human marines, an Aurelian honor guard too exhausted to sneer properly, he walked through halls where tapestries burned in silver bowls and wounded nobles lay beside wounded servants, because catastrophe had finally equalized their blood. Aurelia met him at the strategic dais in battle armor, face streaked with ash, crown missing 3 points. Prepared to dislike him as much as survival allowed, he looked older than in the Hall of 9 Suns. Leaner, scar deeper, eyes red from sleeplessness. But his voice remained calm. "We can evacuate 40 million in the first wave if your port authorities stop separating citizens by caste," he said. Aurelia stiffened. Aurelian priority law preserves continuity of governance. Hale placed a cracked data slate on the table. "It is killing your loading speed by 37%. Children are being turned away because their family rings do not scan. Change it." Emperor Celian, listening from his life support throne, snarled that humans did not command the blood of Valoria. Hale did not look at him. He looked at Aurelia, princess. He said, "You can save pride or people, not both. Choose quickly." There are moments when a kingdom does not fall from invasion, but from one honest sentence spoken at the right wound. Aurelia almost ordered him removed. The old lessons clawed at her mouth. Hierarchy, dignity, ordained rule. Yet outside the war room windows, evacuation ships rose like sparks. And beyond them, the choir descended through cloud layers, black ribs opening to release silver dust that turned living towers into powder. She thought of the Kethri hatchlings she had once dismissed. Thought of 3 million children saved by a human convoy she had tried to stop, and the memory burned like acid. She turned to the portmasters on the command net and revoked bloodline priority. Every citizen, first come. First carried medical need above title. Children above archives. Anyone who refuses will answer to me. The room went still, then the loading numbers surged. Hale nodded once, not triumphantly, not smugly, simply acknowledging a correct action. And somehow that small respect steadied her more than all the court praise she had ever received. For the next 11 hours they worked beside each other without rest. Aurelia coordinating Imperial remnants, Hell directing rescue vectors. Both of them watching maps turn red faster than they could clear them. He never wasted words, never asked permission twice, never treated Aurelian lives as less because Aurelian pride had been cruel, and that became the most unbearable thing about him. The palace fell on the 3rd morning, not symbolically, not gloriously, but with a structural groan like a dying beast. A choir impactor struck the northern shield pillar, and the shockwave tore through the citadel foundations. The Hall of 9 Suns split down the center, ancestral statues toppled. Golden ceilings crashed into evacuation corridors packed with civilians. Aurelia woke under a slab of translucent stone, with blood in her mouth and one arm numb beneath her. For several seconds, she saw nothing but dust and emergency blue light. Then she heard screaming, thin, trapped. Many voices buried in the lower passage. She tried to rise and failed. Her command link sputtered with fragments. Emperor missing, Royal Guard dead. West Hangar compromised, evacuation tunnel blocked. Choir ground units inside palace perimeter. Then a hand gripped the stone above her, gloved human, shaking with effort. Hale's face appeared through the dust, bleeding from his temple. "Princess," he said, "can you move your legs?" She wanted to ask why he was there. Why he had entered a collapsing palace instead of leaving with his fleet. Why human stupidity had such perfect timing. But all she managed was, "I gave no order for you to return." He laughed once, breathless, "No, you didn't." Together they freed her. though together mostly meant Hale bracing the stone with a snapped support rod while Aurelia dragged herself out on one working arm. The Marines with him were gone. Buried or dead, his left shoulder hung wrong. His uniform was torn open across the ribs, and yet he was already moving toward the trapped civilians. Aurelia caught his sleeve. "The royal lift is this way." Hale looked toward the screams. "Then your people are that way." They crawled through maintenance conduits designed for servant machines. Past walls glowing with heat, past noble chambers opened like dollhouses to the burning air. In the lower corridor, they found 52 civilians pinned behind a security bulkhead that had sealed during the collapse. Common workers, palace cooks, archivists, 3 children from a laundry wing, and Lord Mavrin, a high noble who had once proposed sterilizing human settlers on disputed moons. Mavrin saw Hal and spat blood at his boots. "I will not be rescued by a ground ape." Hale wiped his boot on rubble and said, "Then close your eyes." Aurelia should have laughed. Instead, she found herself ordering everyone to form a line. Smallest first, injured next, titles last. Mavrin protested until Aurelia put a plasma pistol under his chin and explained that Extinction had simplified etiquette. The route to the hangar became a nightmare written in smoke. Choir ground units moved through the palace gardens on jointed limbs, harvesting metal from fountains, stripping memory crystals from statues, scanning biological patterns with blank silver eyes. Human rescue teams fought them room by room with weapons Aurelia had never seen. Chemical slugs, magnetic nets, shaped charges, old-fashioned kinetic rifles that punched through adaptive armor because the choir learned energy too quickly and solid human brutality too slowly. Hale called them museum pieces with affection. His people carried wounded Aurelians over their shoulders, cursed at jammed doors, sang marching songs through gas masks to keep civilians from panicking, and died with strange practical courage. One engineer held a reactor valve by hand while coolant burned through her gloves. Shouting for everyone to keep moving, a medic used his own body to shield an Aurelian child from shrapnel, then apologized for bleeding on her dress. Aurelia kept seeing these impossible acts and feeling something inside her rearrange against her will. Not admiration yet, she told herself, not affection. Only battlefield respect. But when a human marine named Ibarra stayed behind to detonate a corridor mine and seal off 20 choir units, Hale paused for one heartbeat, touched 2 fingers to his brow, then kept moving. And Aurelia understood that human mercy did not make them unwilling to sacrifice. It made them know exactly what sacrifice cost at the final hangar. Betrayal waited dressed in imperial gold. General Vost, commander of the Inner Defense Legions, had seized the last royal cruiser and surrounded it with loyal officers, allowing only noble families and military command staff to board. Thousands of civilians pressed against the outer barriers while choir spores fell beyond the broken roof like black snow. Aurelia limped forward, fury giving her strength. "Open the gates," General Vost bowed with perfect form. "Tragedy has forced difficult mathematics, Highness. The bloodline must survive." The workers began shouting, children crying. Human marines raising weapons. Hale stepped beside Aurelia, but said nothing, giving the command to her, because he somehow knew this wound belonged to her people first. Aurelia looked at Vost, at the nobles clutching jewel cases behind him, at the cruiser capable of lifting 10,000, but prepared to leave with 800, and the last beautiful lie of her childhood died. The Empire had not been strong because it stood above the weak. It had only been standing on them. She raised her voice so the whole hangar heard. "By authority of the Imperial blood, I strip General Vost of command." "Open the gates." Vost's face hardened. "Your father named me protector of continuity. A princess with human pets does not overrule Extinction protocol." Then he gave a small nod, and his officers aimed at Hale first. The shot that should have killed the human captain became the moment Aurelia stopped being her father's daughter. She moved before thought, before pride, before fear. Slammed into Hale's side and took the plasma burn across her armored ribs. Pain turned the world white. Hale caught her before she fell, and the hangar erupted. Human marines fired. Aurelian workers surged. Loyal guards who had hesitated finally chose the living over the ranked. Voss tried to retreat into the cruiser, but Lord Mavrin, of all people, struck him in the face with a broken ceremonial staff and shouted that he had closed his eyes long enough. The gates opened. Civilians flooded aboard. And Hale carried Aurelia into the loading bay despite her protests that she could still walk. "You were shot," he said. "So were you," she snapped. He looked down at the burned gap in his side, as if remembering it existed. That was this morning. The absurdity made her laugh. One sharp, painful sound. And for a moment, amid apocalypse, the human captain smiled. The cruiser lifted overloaded, groaning, scraping through the dying hangar doors as choir units breached the far wall. Through the viewport, Aurelia saw Valoria Prime beneath them. Oceans boiling at their edges, forests burning in spiral patterns, golden cities losing their lights one district at a time. Her home was not conquered. It was being unmade. The royal cruiser docked with Mercy of Dawn under emergency clamps, and Aurelia saw humanity's war from the inside, crowded decks full of refugees, screaming infants, blood-slicked medbays, engineers sleeping upright against ammunition crates, volunteers labeling blankets in languages they did not speak, Terran sailors giving up bunks to Aurelian elders who had cursed them hours before. In one corridor, a human child handed soup to an Aurelian officer, still wearing cast jewels. And when the officer stared in humiliation, the child said, "It's hot, careful," as if kindness needed no permission from history. Aurelia sat while a doctor sealed the burn in her ribs. Watching Hale argue with admirals, comfort a dying palace cook by remembering her name, and approve dangerous re-entry runs without asking any pilot to take one he would not take himself. The hatred she had carried for years did not vanish. It cracked, slowly, painfully, and through those cracks came memory. Every human act she had mocked, every life saved she had called vanity. Then the choir changed direction until that moment. The Black Fleet had focused on Valoria Prime, consuming infrastructure, stripping atmosphere, breaking moons for material, but as Mercy of Dawn completed the largest evacuation wave yet. The choir's outer formation turned toward the refugee fleet, as if a single mind had smelled the future escaping. Human tactical screens filled with impossible numbers. 800 choir pursuit forms rising from the planet, 90 harvest arcs adjusting from orbit, unknown mass signatures emerging from the night side. The Terran escorts moved to intercept 6 gray warships against a sky full of extinction. Aurelia heard one human admiral over the channel. "Calm voices only, people. We are the wall now." Hale issued orders with terrible steadiness. Mercy of Dawn would take the refugees through the unstable gravity wake of Valoria's shattered moon. The escorts would delay pursuit, and every civilian ship capable of independent jump would scatter. Aurelia studied the map and saw the ugly truth. The escorts could not hold long enough unless someone remained behind at the wake point and manually overloaded the moon mining drives. No empire prepares a princess for the moment she realizes the enemy is not the one willing to die for her, but the one that made such death necessary. Aurelia said, "Send a remote command." Hale shook his head. "Choir interference is eating automated signals, then send drones. They need local authorization from the old Aurelian mining core. Your systems are theatrical about blood permissions." "I will go," she said. The room snapped toward her. Hale's answer was immediate. No, it was not a command. It was worse. It was fear. Aurelia lifted her chin. "That facility answers to Royal Genetic Authority, Captain. I am useful there. You are also carrying a plasma wound and a civilization on your shoulders." He said, "I have carried worse in court shoes." The argument might have continued. But the choir struck the outer escort line, and one human frigate vanished in a silent bloom of white. Hale looked at the casualty count, then at the refugee trajectories, then at Aurelia. And she understood that survival had become a blade with no clean edge. He assigned a strike shuttle. 6 Marines, 2 engineers, and himself. Aurelia objected that his place was commanding the fleet. He replied that the fleet already had orders. The mining corps did not know his voice. And apparently, princesses required supervision when attempting heroic idiocy. It should have offended her. It almost comforted her. They dropped from Mercy of Dawn in a shuttle whose hull screamed through debris and fire down toward the fractured moon of Arinth. Once a pleasure moon with silver seas and glass resorts, now cracked by choir harvest beams, its mining core still embedded beneath the northern crust. The pilots flew through a storm of palace fragments, dead satellites, frozen bodies, and burning choir spores. Hale strapped across from Aurelia, face pale, jaw clenched. One hand gripping an old metal token at his neck, she recognized it as a human memorial tag. He saw her looking and said, "My daughters." The words landed softly and broke something loudly inside her. She had never imagined Hale with a child, which meant she had never imagined him as anything except an enemy shape in uniform. "What happened?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked out the viewport. "Border plague. 9 years ago, not Kethri. Before that, different world, slower bureaucracy. We arrived 1 day late." Aurelia had no answer. He tucked the tag back beneath his collar. "That is why 1 day matters, Princess." The shuttle shook as a choir dart sliced past, killing one Marine before anyone could say his name, and Hale reached across the aisle to steady Aurelia, as if the conversation had not just placed a grave between them. The mining core entrance was half buried under collapsed silver ice. They cut through with human torches and Aurelian command seals, descended into a facility trembling with old machines. The air tasted of metal and dead salt water. Emergency lights painted everyone in red, and deep below, the moon drives pulsed like sick hearts. Aurelia placed her bleeding palm on the royal console, expecting obedience. Instead, the system demanded Imperial command confirmation from Emperor Celian, not air authority. Hale looked at her. "Your father is aboard the Dawn, unconscious. No channel will punch through this interference." One of the engineers, Malik, examined the ancient interface and swore creatively, "We can bypass it. But the core will cook us if the authorization fights back." "How long?" Aurelia asked. 12 minutes, if the universe loves us." Malik said. Hale checked the tactical feed. "Choir pursuit, reaching wake point in 9. The numbers should have ended all hope." But humans seem to treat hopelessness as a scheduling issue. Malik and the other engineer tore open panels. Hale and the Marines held the upper tunnel as choir units began cutting through the ice outside. Aurelia worked at the console, reciting royal override verses she had memorized for Coronation Theater, suddenly furious that her entire bloodline had built machines more loyal to dead protocol than living children. When the first choir unit entered the tunnel, Aurelia finally saw Extinction up close. It was taller than a battlesuit, smooth as poured darkness, its face a blank oval, reflecting everyone it was about to erase. Human rifles hammered it with kinetic rounds. But the machine adapted, thickening, reshaping, learning. Hale shouted for pattern breaks, and the Marines switched weapons every few seconds. Bullets, thermal foam flechettes, sonic charges. Brutal variety against perfect adaptation. Aurelia fired an Aurelian lance and watched the unit drink the beam. Then Hale shoved an antique explosive into its split chest and kicked it backward. The blast threw them both against the wall, and still more units came. Malik yelled that the bypass was almost ready. Then a choir spike pinned him to the console. He laughed blood onto his teeth and kept typing. "Malik," Hale shouted. "Fall back," Malik answered. "Can't, sir. My spine has filed a disagreement." Then looked at Aurelia. "Princess, when this works, tell everyone humans are handsome and humble." Malik finished the bypass, slammed his palm on the command key, and died smiling at a species that had once called his people animals. The core accepted air authority. Aurelia's handprint flared gold across every screen. The moon drives awakened fully, dragging debris fields into violent alignment. But the overload still required a manual hold until Mercy of Dawn crossed the wake, because the choir interference kept trying to dampen the reaction. A lever. Actual mechanical human-friendly absurdity grafted onto Aurelian machinery by Malik's bypass. Had to remain engaged inside the collapsing drive chamber. Hale saw it, Aurelia saw him see it, and the entire future narrowed to one impossible shape. She said his name once. Not Captain, not human, Rowan. He looked at her with surprise, then something like apology. "The Marines can hold the corridor," he said. "You need to get back to your people." "No," she said, and meant more than refusal. He stepped closer, lowering his voice while the chamber shook and alarms howled around them. "Princess Aurelia Vale, your people will need a voice that can admit what happened here. They will need someone who can build something better than what burned. Mine have enough ghosts, yours need fewer." She tried to order him, threatened him, begged him without using the word beg. And he listened with unbearable gentleness. Then he removed the memorial tag from his neck and pressed it into her hand. "Her name was Lily," he said. "Tell the children we saved today that she helped." Aurelia closed her fist around the tag as if it were a weapon. The last door began to fall. Hela shoved Aurelia through it so hard she crashed into the corridor. The remaining Marines dragged her backward as she fought them with every royal command and wounded strength she had left. Through the narrowing gap, she saw him enter the drive chamber alone. One arm hanging useless, blood dark across his uniform. Face lit by gold overload fire, choir units breaking through the opposite wall. He reached the lever, braced both hands around it, and turned his head toward her. Not kneeling now, not bowing, only standing. The human stood between the princess who had hated him and the extinction that had come to claim her. He smiled once, small and tired, and the door sealed. For 8 seconds, the communication remained open. She heard gunfire, metal tearing, Hale breathing hard, then his voice. "Mercy of Dawn, this is Hale, confirm crossing." The reply came through broken static. "Refugee fleet crossing, still need 10 seconds." Hale said, "You have them." Something struck him, his breath broke. But the lever signal held. Aurelia pressed her bleeding hand to the door. "Rowan," he answered after a pause, "I heard once that Aurelians do not say thank you." She could barely speak, we can learn. The final sound she heard from him was a laugh. Soft, astonished, and then the moon became a sun. The debris storm tore across the wake like the fist of a dead god. Choir pursuit forms vanished by the hundreds. Harvest arcs shattered, black ribs breaking against silver moonfire. Mercy of Dawn and the refugee fleet slipped through the gravity wound with hulls, screaming and engines burning beyond safety. The shockwave caught the strike shuttle during launch and flung it spinning into darkness. Aurelia lost consciousness with Hale's memorial tag cutting into her palm. When she woke, she was aboard Mercy again, surrounded by medics, survivors, and the low, terrible sound of a civilization discovering it had survived without knowing how to live afterward. Valoria Prime was gone from the screens. Not entirely destroyed, but uninhabitable, oceans poisoned. Atmosphere stripped in places, cities dead, the choir had been wounded. Not annihilated, forced away by the overload. Scattered into the outer dark, where Terran and compact fleets were already forming pursuit lines. Emperor Celian had died during the jump, his body finally as powerless as every servant he had never seen. The throne, the law, the blame, the refugees, all of it settled upon Aurelia while she still held a dead human child's name in her hand. For a long time she said nothing. Then she asked how many humans had died saving her people. The admiral beside her hesitated, as if numbers could be made merciful by silence. Aurelia made him answer, 43,612, he said, not counting missing. The number entered her like a sentence. The first council of survivors met inside Cargo Bay 7, because the Imperial audience chamber was ash drifting somewhere behind them. Aurelia stood on a crate before nobles, soldiers, workers, hatchlings from allied species, human officers, and refugees wrapped in mismatched Terran blankets. She wore no crown, only a medical brace, smoke-stained armor, and the memorial tag around her neck. General Vost was in chains near the rear. Lord Maverin sat among common evacuees with one eye swollen shut, and no one knew where etiquette should stand, so it remained absent. Aurelia looked over the faces of her people and truly saw that they were not tears of usefulness, not instruments of dynasty, but lives, frightened, grieving, stubbornly alive. "I was taught that strength meant standing above others," she said. Her voice carried through ship speakers to overflow decks. "I was taught that mercy was weakness. That humans were lesser because they would spend blood for strangers. I believed it, and because I believed it, I helped build the cruelty that almost left our children behind. Murmurs moved like wind. She did not stop. Captain Rowan Hale of Earth stood between us and extinction, not because we deserved him, not because we honored him, but because his people choose who they are, even when others choose hatred for them. My father's empire died at Valoria. Let it remain dead. We will not rebuild its throne from the bones of the poor. We will build a refuge, a fleet, a law that measures worth by life, not blood. And our first monument will carry the names of the humans who saved us. Then she did what no Aurelian monarch had done in recorded history. She knelt, not to surrender, not to shame herself, but before the human dead, before the refugees, before the workers who had been last under her father and would be first under her. The cargo bay fell silent. Then one by one, Aurelians knelt with her. Nobles awkwardly, soldiers stiffly, servants weeping openly. Lord Mavran, with visible pain and no complaint. And finally, even captured, Vost lowered his head because history had turned its eyes upon him and found him small. The human admiral tried to lift Aurelia, uncomfortable with reverence bought at such cost. But she remained down long enough for every watching child to remember later. When the compact fleets arrived too late with polished apologies and strategic condolences, they found no broken remnant begging for protection. They found Aurelian survivors integrated into a Terran evacuation armada, human engineers teaching Imperial technicians how to repair life support without caste codes, Aurelian pilots volunteering for counterattacks beside Earth squadrons, and Princess Aurelia refusing the restored title of Empress until every refugee convoy had food, water, names recorded, and dead counted. The compact delegates asked what terms Earth demanded for such rescue. Territory, ports, military rights, Hale's replacement. Admiral Sato gave the answer with tired human irritation. We demanded they live. The delegates did not know how to negotiate with that. The war against the Choir lasted 7 months after Valoria fell, and Aurelia fought in it from the bridge of a rebuilt cruiser renamed Lily's Promise. She learned that human tactics were less doctrine than argument with physics. That Earth captains prepared 5 retreat plans and then used a 6th invented by a mechanic during disaster. That human soldiers cursed loudly, adopted alien orphans, wrote farewell letters before battle, and still joked while fears shook their hands. She learned that mercy did not prevent fury, it aimed it. The first time she addressed a mixed Terran Aurelian battle group. Some humans stared coldly because grief has memory. Aurelia did not ask forgiveness. She gave orders, took risks first, remembered names, and carried wounded when decks breached. Slowly, suspicion became function. Function became respect, and respect became alliance. At the siege of Namar's Gate, she broke formation to shield a hospital ship, and when an officer warned that the maneuver was not strategically optimal, she answered with words later carved under Hale's statue. Then we will improve the strategy until it includes the innocent. The final choir core was found beyond the dead comet fields where Hell had once taken the Kethri convoy. As if the universe enjoyed circles sharp enough to wound. It was a black cathedral machine wrapped around a stolen asteroid, birthing new harvest fleets from murdered worlds. Compact admirals argued for containment, delay, study, risk assessment. All the careful language powerful people use when others are closest to dying. Aurelia opened a channel to the Terran fleet, Admiral Sato. How long before that core reaches the refugee corridor? For hours, Sato answered. Aurelia looked at the delegates. For hours is not enough time for cowardice to become wisdom. And led the attack, human ships went in first. But this time, Aurelian ships went with them, beside, not behind. Lily's Promise took 3 direct hits, and still drove toward the core while Aurelia transmitted Hale's old convoy algorithms through the chaos. Unpredictable, wasteful, brilliant, human. The core adapted to elegant tactics, so she gave it ugly ones. Debris storms, false retreats, manual burns. Sacrificial drones painted as lifeboats at the last moment. Aurelia rammed Lily's Promise into its shield spine, and held the wound open, while human torpedoes entered. The choir corps broke apart in silence, and across the fleet, nobody cheered for several seconds, because victory over extinction feels less like triumph than permission to breathe years later. On the first green world granted to the Valorian survivors by treaty and Terran stubbornness, Queen Aurelia stood beneath a young sky and watched children run between memorial stones. Aurelian children with luminous crests, human children with scraped knees. Kethri hatchlings near irrigation pools, all too young to understand why elders fell quiet at certain names. The settlement was not an empire, perhaps never would be. It was a refuge called Hale's Rest, built with Terran prefabs. Aurelian glasswork, Kethri gardens, and laws written plainly, so no priest or noble could hide cruelty inside beauty again. At the center stood no statue of Aurelia. There was only a wall of names. 43,000. 612 humans, plus every Aurelian Kethri, and compact soul lost in the rescue war, and before that wall stood a simple sculpture of a human captain holding a blast door. Not kneeling, not conquering, standing. Aurelia came there every dawn, placed one hand on Lily Hale's tag, and read a different 100 names aloud. Children sometimes asked if she had really hated humans once, and she always answered yes, because lies are how old empires begin again. One morning, a little Aurelian girl with silver eyes and a human boy missing 2 front teeth stood beside her at the memorial. The girl pointed to Rowan Hale's name and asked, "Was he the strongest warrior?" Aurelia looked across the valley, where human farmers and Aurelian engineers argued over irrigation pumps, where soldiers taught children to plant trees and crater soil, where rescue ships were being built with more hospital decks than gun decks because humanity had infected her people with its most dangerous disease. Hope, she thought of the Hall of 9 Suns, of her cruel smile, of a human bowing to the dead she had dismissed. She thought of the moon door closing, of his laugh in the final static, of the way he had stood between hatred and extinction and chosen to save both the innocent and the guilty. "No," Aurelia said softly. "He was not the strongest because he could kill." The children waited, wind moving through the new leaves. She knelt between them. "He was the strongest because he could have hated us back. And he did not." Above them, the memorial stones caught the sunrise. And for the first time in Aurelian history, a queen taught her people that the highest power was not the hand that held the sword, but the hand that reached into fire for a stranger, even when that stranger had once called it weak.